Hello one and all, it's review of Dr. Stone, chapter 156, Two Scientists. And we open up with this absolutely amazing shot of Dr. X and Senku. Senku bathed in light, Dr. X bathed in darkness with the moon behind him. And on the fifth or sixth time reading this chapter, I realized that there is a moon behind Dr. X in almost every shot he's in. When he's first introduced, you see the picture of the moon on the wall behind him. Later on, when he's responding to Senku's emails, you can see the rocket and the moon behind him. And then the very next page, you see him standing in front of the rocket with the moon directly above him. And of course, then there is this absolutely freaking amazing full-page shot of him standing in front of the picture of the moon with his clothes literally blending into the darkness. I mean, this is an absolutely amazing shot, and I freaking love it. So yeah, there's a lot of, they're really trying to emphasize, Dr. X and the moon. They're really trying to say these two have some sort of similarity. There's some relationship between these two. I'm just not sure what it is. I mean, this could just be as simple as saying Dr. X represents the dark side of science, the evil side, the one that wants to use their powers to control others. While Senku, he did control people with ramen, represents more the good side, the side that wants to spread science for all, that wants to create a better world together with other people. It's interesting that, that the steel beams around Dr. X aren't seeming there to support him, rather to trap him, to bind him. So maybe Senku needs to find some way to free him? I'm not sure about that. On the other hand, I think a much more interesting possibility is that Dr. X knows something about the Y-Man, his base on the moon, who he is, why he did it, how he did it, all of that, and then at the end of this arc, he's going to reveal some big secrets to Senku that are to be, mind-blowing. Definitely interesting that the only people that he was able to revive were those who were able to stay conscious for the 3,000 years they were petrified. I've definitely been speculating for a long time exactly what the purpose of the petrification device was. My main theory so far has been that its goal was to allow the planet to regrow, to restore the forest, to get rid of the greenhouse gases, just to make the air and the fish and just make the air and the water and the land all much more breathable, all much more bearable, all much better to support life. And this does fit into that theory, that therefore if people do wake up, those few who are allowed are only the best, the ones who can make the most use out of this planet, the ones who won't repeat the mistakes of the past, who are so determined and strong they can rebuild society by themselves, essentially. So yeah, I definitely think Dr. X has some sort of relationship to the moon, maybe the Y-Man, or like I said, maybe he's just representing his dark side, while Senku is representing the sun. Either way is possible. Anyway, then the whole rest of the chapter is a flashback, and I just absolutely love that. We get to see a good old kid Senku 10 years ago. I guess he'd be 8. I think Senku's around 18 right now, so yeah, that sounds about right. As he's testing his first rocket, and not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised that he survived this explosion. It's pretty freaking terrifying, and I definitely think it would get the police involved. That's not something that any person, kid or otherwise, should be doing in an area with people around. Seriously, that rocket almost hit that jogger and his dog. That would have been very, very bad. And we flash over to Taiju attempting to read Intro to Rocket Engineering, and surprise, surprise, it does not go well for him. And I really can't blame him. I consider myself to be a fairly smart person. I'm not genius level or anything, but I'm fairly smart. And yet I'm absolutely certain there's no way I could have gotten through that book at 8 years old. I am utterly certain of it. Even my life depended on it, I could not have done it. Anyway, then Senku realizes if he really wants to learn, he really wants to improve, he needs to get some feedback from actual scientists around the world. And so he just starts sending out emails to everyone. He calls himself Spam Mail Senku. That's in quotes. Maybe that rhymes in Japanese. I don't know. I feel like that was a clever line in the original language that didn't transfer over properly. Anyway, then we go over to the Johnson Space Center of NASA. Then we see the NASA scientist going through emails from school kids. He's like, oh, hey, this one kid is asking if space is black, why is the sky blue? Oh, that's so adorable. And then they're like, oh, hey, now we have an email from a boy in Japan named Senku. Oh, I bet he worked so hard to write this in English. Let's see what it is. And then they see it, and they are utterly, utterly terrified. As he explains his rocket research, everything he's done with it. I think these include the graphs of the experiments he's run, and the scientists are just utterly terrified. They're wondering if this is a joke, if it's real. They just can't figure out what to make of all this. Especially when Senku says that he installed a VPN on the research lab server at the university to use the supercomputer to run the calculations himself. There is so very much illegal with that. So very much. I mean, at the very least, if anyone found out about that, his father would be fired in a heartbeat. I mean, getting time on the supercomputer is not easy. I've heard people have to wait like weeks or even months in order just to get a few minutes on it. And yet it's still faster than having it just run on their own computers. Oh god, what I wouldn't have given for one of those back in college. The one, my main project for this one semester was I was writing this code, and every time I run it took between 2 and 12 hours to finally print out the results. Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of waiting and waiting to see if I had the right answer, to see if I had to change one variable the tiniest of a degree to make it run properly next time. Lots of fun, and only a few minor mental breakdowns. Anyway, they all agree that they should not respond to this kid because either he's a prankster or he's a dangerous criminal. But Dr. X, he feels a little bit differently, and he is interested in this kid, and wow, Dr. X looks differently. I mean, really, really differently. Not just younger, but more innocent, more friendly. I mean, we see throughout this chapter that he is not necessarily a good person, but he just comes off so much more gentle right here than the Dr. X we've seen in the current chapters. Anyway, then he responds to Senku's email, basically tells him his issues with the measuring equipment, and that if they really want to make this work, they should get their hands on a rhodium platinum alloy heat sensor. And of course, he signs the email, "Science is elegant." And only lists himself as Dr. X. It does explain why Senku didn't recognize the name. I mean, it is actually a little unclear if Dr. Xeno is his real name, or if that was just a monogram he went by when he was emailing Senku, or emailing people, you know? Just call me Dr. X. Which does sound kind of cringy, but hey, if you're a NASA scientist, you can get away with it. I mean, I can't really imagine any reason he changed it. I mean, I went over this last chapter. I'm not really sure why he changed his name to Dr. Xeno. But, I mean, this chapter they got xenon gas, so I guess it makes a certain amount of sense. You know, maybe named off of Xenon, I guess. I'm not sure. But, you know, maybe that is actually his name. Senku just didn't know it. Anyway, so then they go to buy a thermometer. Only problem is it costs 500,000 yen, or about 5,000 US dollars. So, not good, not good. Anyway, in order to get that, Senku flies over to America to take his dad's credit card. Because apparently all astronauts in the US get a credit card, which lets them buy whatever they want. Yeah, I have no idea if that's true or not. I saw a lot of debate about that online. I mean, I guess this could exist, but if it does, I feel like, you know, they'd be audited to make sure people aren't spending the credit card on hookers or gambling or whatever. And Senku ended up spending 60,000 or something like that dollars on all this scientific equipment. That's just what we saw. So they definitely have some questions for him about that. Also, I do just love how absolutely completely cruel Senku is. Showing up, getting the credit card, and then immediately leaving. Oh god, poor Byakuya. You really do love your son, but he's just kind of a jerk. I wonder if Senku regrets that after his father's death. Not spending more time with him, not being more grateful for him for all he did. I mean, one of the few moments where we really saw Senku have emotions is when he was standing over his father's grave. He actually let himself cry for a little bit. So I'm sure he feels just a little bit guilty about that, even as cold as he comes off. And when Senku continues to grow and learn experiments, and he's not just learning, you know, about rockets, he's having Dr. X teach him about basically all parts of science. Because, as he says, if we knew which parts of science were useful, everything would be a piece of cake. Like how to get rich by somehow betting only on winning horses at the races. And that's true. And that's very true. You never know how science would be useful in your everyday life. I mean, don't forget, the exact same device Senku used to make golden wire, he also used to make cotton candy. So if he knows everything about science, he will essentially know how to solve any problem. And then Senku seems to get a little concerned when Dr. X emails him telling him science is power, and that his little rocket is essentially the exact same as a ballistic missile. Yeah, that's a little concerning right there. Okay, that's a lot concerning right there. Definitely changing how Dr. X seems to be. I mean, as things move on, he definitely seems to be getting a little more and more maleficent. Especially when he then says that with science we can rule over the ignorant masses, which, I mean, he's not wrong, but that's not That's a very concerning thing to say. Especially to a 10-year-old boy. But that's not what Senku wants to do. He doesn't want to become the leader of the world, even though he basically is a leader of the world right now. He wants to learn everything there is to know. He wants to acquire all the knowledge in the universe. Anyway, then we see Byakuya and Dr. X in the exact same location. So apparently they did know each other, at least to a certain extent. I'm not really sure I'd call them friends, but they seem to have a interesting back and forth. And of course, at this point, Dr. X is asked, hey, what would you do if you were transported back to the Stone Age? Because that is, of course, the conversation every person has at least once in their lives. You know, just a few years or months before it actually happens. A little bit interesting foreshadowing right there. It actually reminds me of in Air Fureta. There's a scene in the light novel where his parents ask him, hey, what would you do if you were transported to a fancy world? And they basically agree, okay, you'd probably meet a nice blonde-haired lolly and a bunny girl, and then you'd just try to escape the world on your own without really trying to stop the big bad or saving the world, but you'd probably end up saving it on your own. Yeah, great foreshadowing. Anyway, when asked about that, his response is, I would recreate the weapons of science from scratch and rule as a dictator. Yeah, that's a very concerning thing to say to your work colleagues. Though Byakuya doesn't seem all that concerned about that. That'd be your move, turning into a despot? He actually seems to find the whole thing funny, which, interesting. And of course, then we're still going on with the foreshadowing. As Byakuya responds, there are always people greedy enough to want to know every last detail about how the world works. Just like my son. And then he basically challenges all the other scientists, including Senku, to a duel of science in the primitive world. And if he loses, then that person's science is better than his, and therefore they have the right to rule. So I think that's a pretty good sign for Dr. X here. I think that once Senku beats him, because we all know Senku's going to beat him, he's the MC. I think that he's going to recognize Senku as a superior scientist, and he's going to essentially agree to follow his rule. You know, no killing people, no shooting at people, that kind of thing. No slaves. I'm sure he has slaves. I'm absolutely certain Dr. X has slaves. Anyway, the Dr. X continues to get creepy as he explains to Senku the exact method for keeping the interior of his rocket at a steady temperature so he could launch bacteria, viruses, or biological weapons at people. I actually kind of hope Senku does that this arc. That's how he beats Dr. X. He creates a rocket, fires at Dr. X, and it has, I don't know, pepper spray, tear gas, something. I think it'd be a very interesting way for him to stop Dr. X. Anyway, then Senku learned how to make these sulfa drugs. Remember? The thing he actually used to save Rui's life way, way back when. So he was studying that even a whole long time ago. And then he goes to Africa, which, not gonna lie, I was not expecting that scene to make a return. When Senku explained they ate lion before, Taiji was like, you ate lion? Yeah, when I was in Africa with my father studying Ebola. I don't see him studying Ebola at all in this chapter, but I do like the reference to, you know, that was one of the first few chapters of the series. It's a very nice callback, I like that. I do think it's funny that Senku told Taiju he was going to Africa, and then Taiju completely forgot that he was in Africa. That's not the kind of thing you're likely to forget. And upon hearing Byakuya say that his son Senku is on the way, he's like, could that be the Senku I'm interested in? The Senku I've been teaching for the last 5 years or so? I'm not sure if before this he made the connection that Byakuya was Senku's father. A little unclear about that. But he seems to recognize Senku fairly easily when they're both standing in front of this rocket, and Senku somehow managed to recognize him too, even though he's only ever known him as Dr. X. I'm a little curious about that, but hey. They've used Captain's intuition before. This is scientist intuition. They both recognize the other scientists they've known for so long. Even though Senku did not recognize him when he was, had a full phone conversation with him. And I know I was joking quite a bit last chapter when I said that Dr. X might be his father. I'm a little more convinced about this. These two guys, they have each other's jawline for sure. Hair is not that different either. I could definitely see this being Senku's father. Anyways, they're both just staring at this rocket. They don't say a word, and this is all they need. This is the moment between scientists. It's such a Senku thing to do. It just feels so right that Dr. X joins in on it, just silently staring at this item of science before they separate from each other, before they walk away. That is so amazing. I absolutely loved it. Anyway, then Senku gets another credit card. Okay, why not? It's clear that no one is checking Byakuya's purchases. And the final panel is Senku and Dr. X staring at each other from a long distance. So yeah, that was a very interesting chapter, very cool flashback. It was to learn more about Dr. X. Like I said, I feel like he's going to end up losing to Senku. I feel like Senku's going to win this battle of science somehow, some way. I would like it if he won using rockets. That'd be absolutely amazing. And then Dr. X will accept his defeat, accept Senku as superior, as the better scientist. I'm not sure about Stanley, though. I feel like Stanley could get in the way. I feel like Stanley could be a problem here. I just don't really trust Stanley at all, so hard to say. But I think if Dr. X does surrender Stanley, like Yoga is going to try to kill both of them, take over for himself or something like that. Or hey, maybe Stanley actually does work for the Y-Man, and he's just following his orders above everyone else. That'd definitely be an unexpected twist. It'd definitely be really cool if that happened. So now Senku spilled the beans out Dr. X, and hopefully Luna heard him give this whole speech about knowing Dr. X, then she'll realize, wait a minute. You're Dr. Taiju! You're trying to trick me, aren't you? Oh, but yeah, knowing her, I wouldn't be too surprised if she didn't actually notice anything odd about this speech, and still kept on thinking Dr. Taiju was the real scientist. So yeah, good chapter. A little disappointed we didn't see anything about the present time, Tsukis' team is still, heading towards the Kingdom of Science somehow, some way. Senku and everyone still has a spy on their ship with a sniper aimed at their heads. That's definitely going to be problematic. I think now that Senku knows that Dr. Xeno is the Dr. X he knew, he's going to be a little more wary, a little more understanding of what it is he's planning, what it is he'd do in this situation. And because of that, he'll be able to realize that the most obvious, elegant solution here is for him to use a sniper, then recognize that Luna's dress is actually a sniper guide, and then offer to wash it, and instead just have Yuzu make a new one that has stripes different sizes, so when the sniper does fire, he misses completely. All right, and then the final big question in this chapter, what's going to happen if Dr. X finds out that Senku is Senku? I mean, he seems to like Senku, he seems to have a respect for him, he views him as a fellow scientist. I think he would still look down on him as just a kid, though. But at the same time, I don't think he would underestimate him as much as he is now. So I can definitely see this going a bunch of different ways. So you can see Senku realize, oh, Senku is too dangerous. Stanley, just kill him right here, right now. You don't have to be gentle. If you end up hitting a few other people as well, I don't care. Just stop him before he stops me. On the other hand, he might have some sort of feelings for Senku or decide that he's just worthy and focus more on abducting him, bringing him to his Kingdom of Science to recruit him, essentially. And the third possibility, which is very, very unlikely, is that he's going to realize it's Senku and then try to make a peace deal right then and there. Like I said, it definitely feels like this can only be resolved by a war of science, so very unlikely. I would be very curious to see what happened if Senku just called him up and said, "Hey, Dr. X, it's me, Senku, that kid you were tutoring for 5 years. So I'm still alive, how are you?" I mean, I feel like the only reason he wouldn't do that is because of Jen. Jen is still, being held captive in the American Kingdom of Science branch, and if Dr. X finds out he lied to him and isn't willing to, negotiate peace with Senku, then he essentially becomes a hostage who will be tortured and killed if Senku doesn't give in to his demands. So, very, very concerning. But please, let me think all this down below. What do you think of Dr. X's backstory? Do you think Senku can work with him? Do you think Senku can work with Stanley? Let me think about all that down below. Be sure to like and subscribe in the next video. Until then, peace!